Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Brazil has recorded 1,269 COVID-19 deaths in the past 24 hours, bringing its toll to over 46,500 with nearly 1 million infections. In the US, 755 more people died in a day as the country's death count surged to nearly 118,000 with almost 2.2 million cases. Globally, the COVID-19 death count has crossed 448,000 with over 8.3 million infections. More in this report.
As surge in COVID-19 cases rattle governments around the world, Latin America continues to be in the eye of the storm. Chile has become a global pandemic hotspot with the highest number of infections and deaths per million people in the world, while Mexico has reported 770 new deaths and nearly 5,000 cases in a day. In the US, President Donald Trump has ruled out any lockdown in the future despite record high surge of cases in 4 states. New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo says widespread testing is the key to containing the virus.
60,000 tests on one day. No state in the United States is doing that. 60,000 tests across the state. Number who tested positive? Less than 1%. That is the lowest percentage of positive that we have had since we have started, period.
The African Union has launched a medical supplies platform after 250,000 confirmed infections and over 6,700 deaths. The online platform is meant to enable all African governments to access critical supplies to combat the novel coronavirus.
We have an urgent need for medical supplies, testing equipment, as well as putting up facilities to isolate and quarantine people, laboratories, personal protection equipment, and equipment such as ventilators, thermometers, and others.
Meanwhile, as most of the European countries lift lockdown restrictions, Germany has announced to extend a ban on large events until at the end of October. South Korea is struggling with numerous new clusters of infections spouting as the country battles a second wave of the fatal virus. China is ramping up testing as 28 more tested positive, including 24 in Beijing.
In Pakistan, 118 more people have died from the new coronavirus in the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 3,093. The Health Ministry has reported more than 5,300 COVID-19 cases in a day, which brought the total infections to over 160,000. The Health Ministry said over 59,000 people have recovered so far, while there are nearly 98,000 active cases across the country. The ministry said the provinces of Punjab and Sindh have both reported around 60,000 cases so far. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa has nearly 20,000 cases, Balochistan almost 8,800, while the capital Islamabad has reported nearly 10,000 cases. Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir have reported nearly 2,000 cases. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in Pulwama district of occupied Kashmir. This raises the death toll to 29 for this month. The civilian was martyred during a cordon and search operation in the Pampori area of the district. The occupation forces have sealed all the entry and exit points of the area and suspended internet service. Meanwhile, the Indian forces arrested a youth after raiding a hospital during a similar operation in the Jaklat Mandi area of the Islamabad district. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 318 days. Pakistan's army says 4 people have been martyred and another wounded in unprovoked Indian fighting in the Nikyal and Buxar sectors along the line of control. In a tweet, the military's media wing said a woman was also among the martyred. It said Pakistani troops effectively responded to Indian fighting. According to Pakistan's Foreign Office, India has so far committed 1,081 ceasefire violations in 2020. Pakistan has time and again asked India to respect the 2003 ceasefire agreement and maintain peace. The Taliban have released 35 soldiers and police personnel of the Kabul administration from captivity. In a tweet, the group spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said the troops were sent back to their families after providing assistance. The prisoner exchange is part of a February deal which the US had signed with the Taliban in Qatar. Earlier this week, the Afghan government and the Taliban agreed that Doha will be the venue for the first meeting in their peace talks. Shaheen said the group was ready to hold intra-Afghan talks within a week of the completion of the prisoner release. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has reiterated the alliance's commitment to the Afghan peace process and security. He was addressing the defense ministers' virtual meeting. Stoltenberg said the Taliban must live up to their commitments and make real compromises for lasting peace. He said in order to support the peace process, the bloc is adjusting its presence in Afghanistan. Furthermore, Stoltenberg said NATO nuclear deterrence in Europe remains vital for peace and freedom in the region. The NATO chief said there is no intention to deploy new land-based nuclear missiles in Europe. Regarding China, he said that as a rising global power, Beijing must participate in global arms control. Syrian government says new U.S. sanctions against President Bashar al-Assad and his wife violate international law. In a statement, the foreign ministry said Damascus will resist these curbs, which penalized 39 companies and individuals. Earlier, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted that more sanctions will come until the regime stops the war and agrees to a political solution. The CEASEFIRE Act contains the most severe sanctions on the government since the Syrian civil war began 9 years ago. Meanwhile, the uncle of Syrian president has been sentenced to 4 years in prison by a French court for laundering money. Rifat al-Assad was convicted of embezzling Syrian state funds to buy homes and offices worth £76 million. The court ruled his assets in Paris and London will be seized. Senior Turkish officials have discussed a lasting ceasefire and political solution in Libya, as well as an energy cooperation during their visit to Tripoli. A delegation led by Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu met Libyan Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj. Çavuşoğlu said he stressed Turkish support to the UN-recognized government of national accord. He said both the sides discussed mutual cooperation in the Mediterranean and steps Ankara will take in the region. Çavuşoğlu described the visit as very beneficial.
We have also discussed in detail ways of enhancing cooperation in every field. We have discussed the steps that will be taken in the field as well as political relations.
Hamas has rejected Israeli accusations of smuggling weapons into the Palestinian coastal enclave. The party's spokesman, Hazim Qasim, said Israel is spreading rumors against the Palestinians to justify its blockade against Gaza. He said Israel has chosen to divert attention from its plan of illegal annexation of the West Bank. Qasim said Hamas has the right to possess military weapons to defend its people against any Israeli military escalation. Hamas's response came hours after Israel announced that it had thwarted an attempt to smuggle weapons into Gaza. Tel Aviv said the weapons were coming through the northern coast of Egypt's Sinai Desert region. In the U.S., House Democrats are circulating a letter cautioning Israel against annexing parts of occupied West Bank. This comes as an Israeli government deadline approaches for starting the annexation process on July the 1st. The letter expresses deep concern but fails to mention any potential consequences from Washington. It cautions Israel that unilateral annexation may harm its relations with Arab neighbors and European friends. Earlier, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said Israeli annexation of the West Bank will amount to breach of international law. He said his government strongly objects to the plan and will work to make the case for a two-state solution. Former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton says President Trump pleaded with China's President Xi Jinping during a 2019 summit to help him secure the election. In his book, Bolton has accused the U.S. president of being driven by political calculations when making national security decisions. Bolton claimed Trump asked Xi Jinping to boost imports of American agricultural products to ensure another term in the White House. He said the This took place during the last year's G20 summit in Japan. The book also claims that Trump downplayed last year's Hong Kong protests, saying the US has human rights problems too. In response, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said publishing classified information is unacceptable. Earlier, the US Justice Department filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the book's publication on the grounds of non-disclosure agreement in 2018. In the US, the former Atlanta police officer who killed unarmed black man Rayshard Brooks last week has been charged with murder and aggravated assault. Prosecutors say Brooks was not a deadly threat and Officer Garrett Rolfe killed him and offered no medical treatment. Prosecutors say Devin Bronson, the officer on the scene, has become a state's witness, but Brosnan's lawyer has denied the claim. Brosnan also faces 3 charges, while there are 11 charges against Rolfe, who is facing a possible life in prison or the death penalty if convicted. In Geneva, the United Nations Human Rights Council backed calls to investigate police brutality and racial discrimination in the US.
In all of these measures, we should go beyond existing recommendations. We need to build on what has worked, from the enormous body of work and experience we already have. Time is of the essence. Patience has run out. Black lives matter. Indigenous lives matter. The life of people of color matter. All human beings are born equal in dignity and rights, and that is why this council, like my office, stands for.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. China says it is resolutely opposed to the comments from G7 countries urging it to reconsider its proposed Hong Kong national security law. Senior Chinese official Yang Jiechi said this at a high-level meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Hawaii. Jiechi said that Beijing's determination to introduce the law was unwavering. Earlier, the G7 foreign ministers had called for China to reconsider this decision in a statement. They said they had grave concerns about the law threatening Hong Kong's rights and freedoms. They said China's move also violates its obligations under the UN-registered joint declaration between China and the UK. The Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress is set to reveal the details of the law in a meeting on June the 20th. Canada has failed to secure one of the rotating seats in the United Nations Security Council for a second time. Canada received just 108 votes, 6 fewer than it received in 2010 under the former Conservative government. In a statement, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau congratulated Norway and Ireland for securing the required two-thirds majority. A total of 128 votes are needed to secure a two-thirds majority, with Norway grabbing 130 votes and Ireland bagging 128 nods. Mexico and India were also elected to the body unopposed, but had to secure required two-thirds votes to confirm their election. Meanwhile, Turkish diplomat Volkan Bozkır was also elected unopposed as the president of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly.
Number of votes obtained.
Number of votes obtained, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır of Turkey, 178. Having obtained the required majority of members present and voting on the greatest number of votes, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır of Turkey is elected President of General Assembly at the 75th session.
Volkan Bozkır of Turkey is elected President of General.
The 193-member body must return to continue voting to fill the African seat after there was no clear winner between Kenya and Djibouti. The new members will start their 2-year term on the 15-member council from January 2021. Now moving on, Egypt's parliament has approved amendments giving President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi a greater influence over the chamber in elections later this year. The amendments say 50% of those elected to the House of Representatives will now be chosen through a closed list of political parties. Previously, 20% of the lawmakers were elected from the closed list. All parties on the closed list are part of a pro-Sisi coalition. The Parliament also approved an amendment for electing a second chamber established through constitutional revisions last year. Asian stock markets are trading mixed as investors weigh the implications of a recent uptick in coronavirus cases. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is trading over 0.5% lower. Seoul's Kospi has lost nearly 0.5%. In Japan, Nikkei 225 is trading fractionally lower. Bucking up the trend, Shanghai Composite is trading marginally higher. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil has lost a fraction. The EU says it will do its best to seal an agreement on new ties with Britain by the end of 2020 without compromising on core values. Addressing the European Parliament, Bloc's chief Ursula von der Leyen said they are ready to extend the transition period. She said there is little time left to reach an agreement. Von der Leyen said it is clear that there cannot be a comprehensive trade agreement without fisheries. The EU chief said there must be a level playing field and a strong governance mechanism. Britain left the EU on 31st of January after 47 years of partnership, but there has been little progress on designing a new relationship. The US says it is unlikely to reach a trade deal with the UK before US presidential election in November 2020. US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer made these remarks as both the countries begin second round of negotiations this week. Lighthizer said Washington is looking for a comprehensive deal with London and will not settle for any limited agreement. He said the US will seek access to the UK markets for American farmers and termed existing British standards as thinly veiled protectionism. The two countries exchange £230 billion worth of trade each year. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.